told you there was a gaming magazine that happened to be a pivotal part of gaming history. One so successful that in 2011, it was the third best-selling magazine in the US when it sold 8 million copies a month. There was a time when this platform seemed untouchable, but everything changed when social media attacked.
That's rough, buddy.
From its peak in 2011 to today in 2024, many things have changed. Fact-checking has gone out the door in exchange for speed, reading habits have changed, and for some people, they just stopped reading altogether. Because of this once great behemoth of the industry slowly began to become a shell of itself, ultimately leading to its demise. I'm talking about Game Informer magazine, a once proud staple in every hardcore gamer's diet. Whether you were the kid just browsing around Gamestop aimlessly, or the kid waiting their turn at the doctor's office, if a copy of this magazine was available, you were reading it. And that's because before social media crept into every aspect of our lives, the best way to get information and have your imagination intrigued was through a book, a newspaper, or a magazine. So how does one go from being an integral part of every gamer's life to eventually not even existing anymore and being at risk of being lost to time? Stick around to the end of this video because I'm gonna give you all those answers and more as we explore the downfall of Game Informer. Before we do, first let's talk about their Before there was GameStop, Game Informer had its humble roots in Funkoland. Funkoland was a gaming store primarily found in the Midwest, and still to this day, it's probably my favorite brick and mortar game store. My mom's side of the family was based in East St. Louis, so whenever we'd visit in the 90s, I'd beg my parents to take us on a trip to Funkoland. They had the best selection of new and used games, and that's because this is before gaming went mainstream and corporate, so everything was priced fairly. Funkoland is where I actually discovered the Strider series when I caught a used copy on sale, so that place will always be a core memory for me.
Uh-oh, nostalgia box.
Canon event aside, Funkoland is also where Game Informer was birthed. Back in 1991, Game Informer was originally released as an in-house newsletter to Funkoland customers. Fans naturally loved it as, at the time, there wasn't much reading material for a still relatively new hobby known as gaming, seeing as many viewed it as just a trend for kids. But eventually Funkoland was purchased by Barnes and Noble, nigga. From that acquisition, Barnes & Noble decided to change the name of Funkoland to GameStop. So naturally, Game Informer became a product of GameStop. Also, if you ever wonder why Funkoland and EB Games disappeared and GameStop just randomly appeared in their place one day, now you know why. It's because of Barnes and Noble, nigga. By 2011, Game Informer was pushing 8 million copies a month. That was more than Time Magazine and Sports Illustrated combined. This was done by upselling gamers every chance that they got. When GameStop wasn't trying to get you to pre-order a game or finessing young adults into their company credit card with insane interest rates, they were also pushing their Power-Ups reward program. I don't recall how much it cost when I was a kid, but according to their website, these days it costs $25 a year. And with that, it came discounts on games, extra trading credit for used games, and you got an annual subscription to Game Informer. Now, I ain't care about any of that other stuff. I solely subscribed to the Power Up reward program for the magazine because the content was solid, and if you do the math, it was like $2 an issue plus all the benefits listed earlier. The membership practically paid for itself if you are a hardcore gamer and you love to read. I and many others would spend hours reading issues, and this is because when I was a kid, the internet was still a luxury and it was a lot slower. It was something about holding that magazine and diving deep into the world of these video games that the general public didn't have access to at that time. For people whose brains have been fried by short form content, you have to understand this was a thing. The world was a much slower place, which made it easier to digest what you were consuming. I recall hanging out at the store after school in the magazine section. I'd be looking over my shoulder as I cracked open the new Playboys and Hustlers.
Little nasty!
I mean, Game Informer. Listen. Often you'd have employees checking in with you asking if you were okay, and I was more than fine. I was just enamored with the whimsical world of these games that I knew that I couldn't afford as a kid. I'll never forget the day I saw the Jack 2 issue of Game Informer on the GameStop shelves. I must have spent 2 hours in that GameStop reading it because I couldn't afford it at the time, and it's not because I was a slow reader, I was just reading it over and over. So shout out to the employees that didn't mind that I was doing that and they never kicked me out the store. Game Informer set the bar. They had cover stories on games that nobody else had, and they had interesting think pieces that would stir up conversations amongst friends in online forums. Take their top 50 games of 2016 issue. If you were on that list, it was like winning an Oscar or a Grammy. And the same thing was true if you received a poor review. Especially in those early days before the internet, that would send developers into a frenzy because once again, it wasn't much competition, so they had authority. For some people, hating is a monthly ritual. For others, beating a schmeat with scented candles lit and R&B playing is. But for me, the monthly ritual was Game Informer. New issues would drop, drop, I'd read them from cover to cover, and then I'd go to school and act like I was some type of industry insider with all the details during lunchtime conversations. And this is before the internet went mainstream, so you didn't have independent online creators, and the IGNs and GameSpots of the world could only reach so many people. Essentially, GameStop was sitting pretty because the competition wasn't stiff. They had a magazine that was printing them money hand over fist every month, and they basically controlled the market. But here's the thing, Sir Isaac Newton once said, "What goes up must come down." Yeah, Game Informer was breaking plenty of records during their heyday, but what GameStop failed to realize is the world was slowly shifting and everyone was noticing but them. They might have been too busy robbing children with their trading credit values to notice that a storm was on the horizon. Because once high-speed internet became more accessible and the concept of the family computer was dead in exchange for everyone having their own computer or smartphone, that's when online content started popping up left and right. I mean, why wait a month to read about a game when you can get that info instantly at twitch.tv/the Black Hokage? These, among other things, is what GI would face during the fall off of Game Informer didn't happen overnight. There's no one particular moment that you can pinpoint to where you can say, yeah, that's when they fell off. This is more of a death by 1,000 paper cuts type of situation. It all started with the internet. GI started the first iteration of their website back in 1996, but if you use the Internet Archive to take a look at the original website from 96, you'll see they weren't taking the whole internet thing too seriously. I mean, the original website looked like a free MySpace page made by some teens from that era. Even if we fast forward to 2006, 10 years later, you'll see the layout was still a clusterfuck. So it's safe to say, although they did have an online presence, it wasn't a priority. It wasn't until 2009 that GI decided to revamp their whole website, and what we got was something that looked much more modern and sleek, even when the site was still in beta. The issue is, at least from my perspective, they had a pretty website, but they still weren't keeping up with the times. By the time the new website launched, Twitter and Facebook were a thing, and Instagram launched a year later in 2010. Now games platforms were utilizing social media to release news tidbits in fast spurts, something a magazine could never do. Not to mention, social media was also used to interact with fans, do giveaways, and just to meme it up. It gave a greater sense of community than just a website. We also saw news sites start to transition into content creation. Standard video reviews had always been a thing, but you started to see more news sites launch podcasts and daily talk shows to feed the streets. It was also a great way to once again interact with your community. Game Informer eventually started to do all this stuff, but by the time they adapted to the market, it was already saturated and viewers could only consume so much content. Personally, when I think about the internet age, I rarely caught myself using Game Informer as a source. I just didn't see them too much on my Twitter timeline or my Google News feed. One thing I will give them credit for though is, when I did see them, I love using them as a source because of their no-nonsense way of reporting on games. Suicide Squad sucked, but the way in which IGN covered that game also sucked. They were very vindictive and nasty simply because they didn't get a review code for Suicide Squad. Their entitlement led them to stooping low and behaving in a manner you'd only expect from one of these video essay YouTube channels that swears every video game sucks. Game Informer remained true to the sport, and for that, I salute them. They just weren't able to be consistent, and half the battle in this digital age is visibility, especially in this day and age where a lot of people don't even care if something is true or not. I think it was hard for them to remain consistent with their online presence because their resources were split. Not only did they have to release monthly issues of a magazine, but now they had to also produce digital versions of the same magazine, plus keep up with the daily news posts on their social media pages. If I could take an educated guess, I'd guess they were probably understaffed, but they couldn't bring in more quality writers because of their parent company. Cause let's be real, GameStop.
You ain't nothing but a broke boy.
Seriously, have you been to GameStop recently? It is one of the most depressing places to shop in 2024. I do not go to GameStop unless it's a last resort. Chat, if you ever see me at a GameStop, it's because I couldn't find a copy of a game I was looking for on Amazon, at Best Buy, Target, Walmart, or a local mom and pop shop. For me, it is World War GameStop until I die. It's more random graphic tees, half-open pops nobody wants, Minecraft diamond ore sword replicas, and snot-nosed kids running around than games at GameStop. That place is a nightmare to shop. Excuse me while I go off topic and I rant for a moment, but the last time I was there was a year ago. My Nintendo Switch dock broke down, so I couldn't play Smash Bros on my TV anymore, and I needed a replacement. So after exhausting all my options, I head over to a GameStop near me, and they don't have it. But you wanna know what they did have? Dear CEO of GameStop, you're a dumbass. How do y'all not carry Nintendo Switch dock replacements, but half of your prime shelf space in the store is given to items that nobody cares about, like those traveling suitcases with the fucking TV monitor in it and space to put your console in?
If you don't get that bullshit out of my face, bitch.
I believe this is why Game Informer lacked the resources to compete in modern day journalism, because unfortunately they were funded by the same buffoons who run GameStop. If you take a look at the data, I could argue it was only a matter of time before Rome fell. The day was August 2nd, 2024, and it felt like any other Thursday. I woke up, I rolled out of the bed to wash my face and brush my teeth. And then I proceeded to take a massive dump.
Way too much information, brother.
As I was blowing up my toilet, I began to do what every human of the 21st century does. I began doom scrolling on social media, and what I found is a tweet stating that after 33 years of service, Game Informer magazine would be shutting down. A tweet you can't even find anymore because GameStop scrubbed all evidence of GI's existence off the internet days later. It was reported that due to poor viewership and financial struggles, GameStop made the executive decision to shut down all operations at Game Informer. In a post that's since been deleted, GI released a statement that reads, "After 33 years of bringing you the latest news, reviews, and insights from the ever-evolving world of gaming, it is with a heavy heart that we announce the closure of Game Informer. From the early days of pixelated adventures to today's immersive virtual realms, we've been honored to share this incredible journey with you, our loyal readers. While our presses may stop, the passion for gaming that we've cultivated together will continue to live on. Thank you for being a part of our epic quest, and may your own gaming adventures never end." As someone who grew up with Game Informer, this sucked to read. But you know what made this decision even worse? Not only were their operations being shut down, but half the staff wasn't even notified beforehand. Reports claim that employees found out on Twitter just like you and I. And then a former director of GI claimed that 70% of their latest issue on their magazine was finished, but they still had to scrap all their work. They didn't even get to go out with a bang. So naturally, this sent shockwaves throughout the industry, with many industry vets sending their condolences on Twitter. World-renowned and devilishly handsome content creator the Black Hokage said, "RIP to one of the GOATs. Easily one of my favorite gaming magazines coming up as a kid. That 12-month subscription you got from GameStop came in clutch." Stuff like this sucks because I hate to see people getting treated like cattle. It's just an unfriendly reminder that you are nothing but a number to these corporations, so you should never get comfortable. Hopefully these former staff members can find new work and they can land back on their feet sooner than later. Oh, it gets worse, by the way. After the termination of their workforce, GameStop then proceeds to delete the Game Informer Twitter, and they deleted the entire Game Informer website. 33 years. Yeah, 33 years of gaming history was destroyed in an instant, and this is why third-party websites like the Internet Archives are important. We have to take those random snapshots to preserve history. Without the Internet Archives, I would not be able to visually reference the GI website in this video, because if you go to the website now, you just get a goodbye screen. I hope those employees took screenshots of their best work, because you should be able to use your former work for your resume before it's deleted, but GameStop is on some other shit, and this is why I said earlier, it will always be World War GameStop with me. So I want to use the tail end of this video to share some positive energy, because Lord knows we could all use some. I took to Twitter to ask you, the viewer, what's your favorite issue or issues of Game Informer magazine and why? The purpose? I wanted to show some love to the OGs of the gaming industry because we do appreciate what you did. And here are some of my favorite responses. Lynn said the Mass Effect 3 cover was his favorite issue because he had never been more excited for a game release, and his favorite aspect of the magazine was being introduced to new games that he had never would have given a light of day. The article they did on XCOM Enemy Unknown got him into the entire genre. Chi-Town says Titanfall definitely is up there as his favorite cover. He was never big into FPSs, but this one caught his attention immediately. Also, he loved the Infamous cover. It was another one of his favorites because he loved Sucker Punch, and he also loved reading Andy's intros. LaShawn says he loves the Batman Arkham City cover. He said, "This has got to be one. I love this one just because I remember how hyped it was when the game came out, and I remember trying to draw the cover over and over again." He said it was never good, but that magazine held him down to the big day when he finally got his hands on Batman Arkham City. Jubb says he doesn't have a specific cover that he loved more than others. Honestly, he just responded because he wanted to flex his Game Informer collection. This man basically did a Game Informer spread like it was money, so shout out to Jubb. The Fro Knows says Game Informer issue 236 is his favorite. The best part was simply reading about all the different games, consoles, updates, etc. before he had a cell phone and before he started reading articles online. Also, the covers were always fire, so pour one out for a legend, he says. Mr. Degenerate says Game Informer 301 was his favorite issue, and it was because he was skeptical if Insomnia had what it took to make a Spider-Man game, but after reading the issue and seeing how much love and understanding they had of Spider-Man, it made him know the game was in safe hands. Also, he says his favorite artist was Alex Ross, who did the cover. The Last Homebody says his favorite issue is the one about the unreleased Snoop Dogg game. It felt like it had a lot of production behind it. And if I could add on to this, I didn't even know that Snoop Dogg had a game coming out. So you actually just put me on to something, and I'm gonna have to do my research later because now I'm interested. What happened to that game? Homeless Girl says this was her favorite issue of Game Informer, and it's because it's infamous. I mean, come on guys, it's infamous. It speaks for itself. Regular Leg says, for me, Game Informer was the only window I had into the gaming industry. When I started getting issues in the early 2000s, I still had dial-up internet and basic television. As a kid from a small town in Minnesota, it was really cool to see Game Informer had its headquarters in my state instead of California or New York. The Def Tay says his favorite cover was the Last of Us one, and it might sound crazy now, but when this dropped, it had me too hyped. He went to the midnight release, and for that I say I'm not gonna judge you because I understand where you're coming from. When this game first came out, there was a lot of hype behind it. This is before Naughty Dog put out 100 million remasters of the goddamn game. Beto says, Game Informer is the GOAT. I loved every issue. My favorite thing about it, it encapsulated what it meant to be a gamer. That feeling of being a gamer, just like the OG G4. No fluff or commercialized product. Cody says he loved Game Informer because he'd see a sweet ass cover and pop it open to read, and he'd learn about games that he never thought about playing. It gave him some gaming versatility and it opened his mind up a bit. Low key, he says, it's the reason he never canceled his GameStop power-up reward subscription. KKK Slayer says he loves Game Informer because, man, my dad used to buy these, but I gotta go find my old collection of them. As a teen, I used to get sucked into these magazines because of the concept art. A few of my favorite games that I've ever played, I've discovered from Game Informer. Blake says that his favorite issue is Game Informer issue 202. The Halo Reach cover was pure hype leading up to the game. Knowing it was the final Halo game from Bungie and how much they were doing with the lore, it just made him excited for the release. Stan says he loves Game Informer because his pops used to get monthly issues in the mail for a year, but they ended up losing them all, so his memory is trash. But something around September 2005, that's what like really stuck with him. Cage Ragnarok says his favorite issue is the one with Blue Dragon on it. He says it's in my storage unit, but this is by far my favorite. The coming out party of Mistwalker and the first acknowledgement of Akira Toriyama, which, by the way, if I could add something to this, Blue Dragon, criminally underrated JRPG that was exclusive to the Xbox 360. Hebrew says, I had this in my wall for years. Beats His Life says, I have some more somewhere, but these are the ones I have sitting on my shelf. If I had to choose out of there, probably Alien Isolation. It had their top 25 horror games of all time in that issue, and I loved reading it. Alex says he loves Game Informer because when he was a kid, he didn't have newer systems. I pretty much had Super Nintendo throughout the PS2 life cycle, so the only thing I had was Game Informer magazine and the old G4, which I remember my grandma giving me a subscription to. Kid Kazoo says his favorite issue of Game Informer is the one with Death on the cover for Darksiders 2. He said this cover, this story about a brother going on a quest to save his brother and proving his innocence. This game made me idolize Death as a character with a lot to lose, but with insane risks. Cushion Liger says he loves the cover with Saints Row 3 on it. This was after the hype of Saints Row 2, and it had him hyped seeing this in the mail. At the time, he was loving the new look and the art style. Plus, he loves Game Informer because this is before all the hate trains for gaming and the DEI and the woke broke bullshit that's going on. Basically, this is back when gaming journalism was just about reporting on games and not all this sensationalism. And I think that's what makes the death of Game Informer so sad. It's almost like the last of the old guard is passing away as we usher in fully this new digital age. McLovin loves the Battlefield 3 cover. He loves this one because he remembers being in school when this one came to his house, and in the article they were talking about the differences between Battlefield 3 and Modern Warfare 3, and there was this whole big debate between me and my friends on which one would be better. I could add to that, yeah, I remember those days. That was a great rivalry. And Zero Chaos says, even though this is a year in review issue, this got me into some legendary games such as NBA Street Volume 2, The Knights of the Old Republic, and The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. These magazines made me feel my love for gaming was important in a time where gaming wasn't in the front of entertainment. This was our ESPN mag or GQ magazine. LOL. And I agree, this was our ESPN or GQ magazine. But you know, Zero, I'm happy you brought up NBA Street Volume 2. You just opened the door for me to bullshit my way into promoting my previous video. It was actually on the history of NBA Street and why we haven't gotten a new one. Plus, I talk about the announcement of a new spiritual successor to the Street series. Yeah, NBA Street is back, ladies and gentlemen. And if you want to know more about that game, click the card on the screen.